Let us begin. Good morning, everybody. Joyce Ruff. She's a theologian and a poet, and she just writes with such beautiful imagination. I'm just going to begin with a little prayer by her. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, give us generous hearts to have gospel messages to align our life, our love, and our time in their light. Gracious God, give us generous hearts to be gracious in our giving. Gracious God, give us generous hearts to recognize the abundance of blessings in each day. Gracious God, give us generous hearts to know the freedom that comes with true generosity, to fall more deeply in love with God, so that our hearts are strong to give it away wherever and to whomever it asks. Amen. So we're going to talk about trees today, and we're going to talk about people hiding in trees and when we might be hiding in trees, and to end our time together with the question, is Zacchaeus really a story of conversion? And what is conversion? So, so let us begin. So we're going to, first of all, as usual, I have to put you in the context of geography, and I need to put you in the context of when this took place, sort of the history of Jericho, and then also a little bit of context about what is a tax collector so we can understand all that this person represents in the Palestinian context with Jesus. Then we will read the story together. We're going to also go over the framing of the story, just like when we studied Mark together in February and March. It seems like a long time ago, but it's at least important for me to put it in context. Is what did Jesus, who did he encounter before? And is this all part of this lesson in these weeks of the stories of conversion and transformation? And then finally, I'm going to pose some, I guess, provocative or different kinds of questions about people with faith and people seeking faith, and how we're all children of God. So, so let's begin. So first of all, it's important to know this story takes place in the city of Jericho. And Jericho, geographically, is an oasis. It's full of water. It's the oldest continuing living city in the whole world. Why? Because it has water. It has an oasis. And so Jesus has just come down from the Galilee. He's walked in this dry, along the Jordan River, dry area. And here is Jericho. And Jericho's really important because it was used for agriculture. It was called the Palm City, and it was known for roses, and it had palaces. It was a very, very wealthy, productive city. And so what's significant about that in this particular story is, one, definitely Jesus would have stopped there. If anything, just for water, just for refreshment, because then he's got to journey up the hills to Jerusalem. By car, that's only like 20 minutes on a modern highway. But walking, it would have been a couple days for sure. Very dangerous, animals, dry, desert. He would have taken the old Roman road, but even so, he would have stopped in Jericho. He would have walked from the Galilee, probably about 3 days walk, and he would have stayed in Jericho. And it's like you're out in the countryside, maybe in the farmland of the Midwest, and all of a sudden there's Des Moines, Iowa in front of you. There's Jericho. So who's in Jericho? Wealthy tax collectors. Now, they're giving the money to the Romans, that's true. But what's important is that that's a base for collecting taxes. And can he or she get them? Definitely, because it's a very, very wealthy town. It's also a crossroad internationally. This is where people pass through to get to the Mediterranean. So it's a really busy place, and that's important to understand the significance of this taxpayer story. So the next thing I want to do is just frame it. What's going to go after this is Jesus is going to go off to Jerusalem, and the passion story begins. So this is kind of like his last stop. And because Joe has asked us in our continuing formation classes this month to talk about conversion, which I think is really important during the season of Lent, because there's another story, there's a couple stories, but there's another story that happens right before this that I would be very remiss in not reminding you about this before we read the story of Zacchaeus. So we know Jesus has walked, right? He's tired, he's with his disciples, we know he wouldn't have gone alone. He's with his entourage. And who does he meet right outside the city? Now, he's not named in Luke, but he's named in Mark, and that's Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus is blind. He can't see, and he's hanging out by the city gates. Okay, that's probably where someone had left him. And yet, he's blind, but he recognizes who this is in front of him. He's blind. And, you can bring that forward and say, well, Sue, if he's blind, how do you know? That's the grace of God, isn't it? That's the grace, the gift of faith. So here's Bartimaeus, and they have their encounter, remember? And now we have the story of Zacchaeus. So one other geographical sort of tidbit that I think helps you live into this story. So Jericho is surrounded by gates. Why in ancient times would a busy, important city have to be surrounded by gates? Anybody conjecture here?
Keep people out, others outside. Out.
Yes. I'm sorry to say such a difficult, ugly thing on this day, but yeah, you got to protect yourself. So there's Bartimaeus, and Jesus has gone in, and this is our Jesus, right? He's not gone in on a big white stallion. He's probably walked in. He may have had a donkey. It's hard to say, but there he is, the weary traveler. And he enters in, and boom, this is a busy place. Agriculturally, excuse me. It's filled with date palms. It's filled with agriculture. There's people. It's a trading place. And he walks in, and I want you to, for a minute, be in that crowd. Okay, it's crowded. There's a lot of people. There's trade going on. There's families that live there. There's workers and all types of people, very wealthy and those that are laborers. And this is the context, because you've got to be Zacchaeus for a minute. It's crowded. It's really, really crowded. And now let's read the story. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry, come down, for I must stay at your house today. So Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome Jesus. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he has gone to be the guest of the one who is a sinner? Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. Amen. So what is it, is sort of something to sort of dig into and imagine, is that in the book of Luke, tax collector, tax man is mentioned 6 times. And here we have another one, and he's rich. So what's important here, I think, for you to understand in the context of this story and of that time is, why is Zacchaeus rich? Because Jesus doesn't hang out with rich people. So he's rich because he siphons off money. And remember when and the Romans knew that. That's how he gets his, 10%, kind of like a realtor sells your house and takes a bit. That's their fee. He's rich because what did we learn about Jericho? Jericho's a busy, wealthy city that is a city for a tax collector to be very successful. So it's important for you to see the understanding of who Zacchaeus is, and then we'll bring it forward to our own lives. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, because he was short in stature. Okay, so hold on a second. Remember how we described the city. There's throngs of people. Okay, he's in the middle of downtown Manhattan. He's in a train. There's lots and lots of people, and he's short in stature. So a lot of theologians discuss this translation of this word short in stature. Can we just leave it to say he's among all these people who, remember, he's not the most popular person because he collects taxes. So the short in stature could also mean not real popular. They're not going to open the way for him to walk through. Okay, so that's an important consideration. He's in the crowd, short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus, who was passing on the way. Because remember, I told you in the understanding of the timeline, is Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, right? He's going for the Passover. So he needs to get there. So he is literally passing through. And so Zacchaeus climbs a tree. Now, actually, if you go to Jericho, and some of you have had the privilege to be there, there is still a sycamore tree that they say are the roots, just like the Garden of Gethsemane. There's an olive tree there that they're saying is the original one from over 2,000 years ago. Probably so, it's the root. It's not the actual tree. Anyway, the point is, remember what I told you about the city of Jericho. It's rich. It has rich in water. And so trees are huge, and they're huge. Sycamore trees are huge. Some people call it a fig tree, sycamore. My point for us this morning, it's a tree, and he climbs up there. So the tree, which I believe this is true, has leaves. So it's not like he's up there, hey, here I am. He's still, I think, as I read into this, he's still kind of hiding. Because remember, he's not real popular, okay? But he wants to see Jesus, okay? That's important. And he didn't just say, oh, excuse me, he ran ahead. There's energy in this sentence. There's energy in this person's curiosity. And that's an important word I want to bring through this morning, curiosity. He ran ahead. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry, come down, for I must stay at your house today. Oh my heavens. If we encountered each other and you were near my house, I think I'd be the one, of course I would, invite Joe to tea. Joe wouldn't say, Sue, I'm hungry, so, could you fix me a full spread of afternoon tea? Jesus is inviting himself. I mean, I think you already know enough about Palestinian culture at that time and even today. When you're in this time, in this dryness, it's customary. We know Martha and Mary did it, to invite people in to wash their feet, wash their hands, and give them bread. There's no restaurants, there's no passing by. And so this table fellowship would have happened, but excuse me? Jesus invites himself before he's invited in. And notice this phrase is so deep and rich. When Jesus came to the place, so that must be the sort of the park or the little area in Jericho, he looked up. Excuse me? When I'm walking and it's really crowded, I'm not looking up, right? Because I could fall, I could bump someone. But there's the grace of God. There's the whole, oh, it's so beautiful. He just had to sense this presence of Zacchaeus. Does God sense us? I don't know. But that's how I read the beauty of this statement. It's one sentence. By the grace of God, Jesus would be walking like this, but there's Zacchaeus. And not only does he sense the presence of this holy man, the tax collector, but he invites himself to his house for tea, table fellowship. Wow, the audacity of that. And yet, we're talking in these weeks about conversion and transformation that is given to us as a gift of our faith. Did Jesus sense in this one sentence, remember Bartimaeus recognized Jesus, and here is this man in the tree. So Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome Jesus. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he has gone to be the guest of the one who is a sinner. Okay, we have to break this apart in two sets of actions. Zacchaeus, according to the translation and the Gospel of Luke, doesn't climb down the tree and like, I'm not sure. He hurries down and was happy to welcome Jesus. I'm sorry, the tax collector, who is not respected in the town, he's not liked. It's kind of like IRS and the Uncle Sam when you get the letter, right? This is not a man who walks around. I don't know this, but I can't imagine this man being full of self-confidence. He's well loved in the town. He's happy to welcome Jesus. We would be too, right? But he's not invited Jesus. Jesus invited himself. And is that a grace? Is that part of this transformation that's happening? Jesus recognizes the grace of this child of God, and this child of God recognizes who Jesus is. Contrast that, please, with the next sentence. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he has gone to be the guest of the one who is a sinner. He's a sinner in their eyes, remember, because he siphons off money. So I owe $22 for taxes. 2 of those go to Zacchaeus. It's a wealthy town. We don't have to go into that again. That, for them, is a sinner. So you've got this, it's a beautiful context here. You've got this yin yang, this light and dark, this beauty of Zacchaeus, full of grace, climbs down the tree and, come to my house. And then you have the people. Remember, it's crowded. And they're going, really? But we know our Jesus, don't we? He doesn't even care what day of the week it is. Jesus welcomes. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. So when you go to the Old Testament, specifically Deuteronomy, you will see there's rules for robbing. So if you've taken money, you need to pay it back 4 times and more. But besides this sort of mathematical formula, what I wish we could take away from this is what happened a tad before. Did Jesus say, okay, Zacchaeus, I'm going to cut a deal with you. If you repent, XYZ. Jesus didn't even say that. God doesn't say that. Susan, you need to do XYZ, and the kingdom of heaven is yours. This is so beautiful. This is Zacchaeus, the sinner in the eyes of the community, the hated tax collector. Here he is without being asked, what's going on in his heart? We want to talk about conversion. What's happening? What's happening? Does he already know? Could you consider the fact that Zacchaeus,
Whoa.
yeah,
Susan, when you touch that white part.
oh,
on your hand.
this,
Yeah.
okay, sorry. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. I really appreciate it. You can see I teach with my hands. I'm sorry.
I love that about you.
When you see me in person, you're going to have to tie me down at the pulpit. So let's talk, please, for a minute about this time frame that Zacchaeus is not asked. He's not given 1, 2, 3 why he has to do X, Y, Z before he is forgiven. He offers unabashedly, and not only to give half his possessions to the poor, but then in case he's considered robbing you, he'll do X, Y, Z. So the question that some commentators and theologians ask is, has Zacchaeus already done this? Before he's up in the tree, before Jesus sees him, has Zacchaeus already repaid the debt? To me, that's not important. But I wanted you to know that that's a talked about dialogue. But what is important is that Zacchaeus says this unsolicited by Jesus, at least in this narrative. And again, I like that we can now reimagine what is transformation. Does it happen at just a moment and then you're filled with God's light? Or is it a slow process? Was Zacchaeus, I don't like the word happy, but was Zacchaeus not content with his life? Did Zacchaeus know something was missing? And so that's where this argument is. Did he do these paybacks beforehand? It doesn't matter. There's a transformation happening so great, so deep, that he goes ahead and is going to sort of correct the mistakes he'd made financially, which are significant. Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he, Zacchaeus, too, is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." So if the people around Jesus and Zacchaeus in this square of the city heard that, taxpayer, the hated taxpayer, let's just put it out there, he's a son of Abraham. Wait a minute. What is a son of Abraham? And isn't this also a notion of when God names people? Abraham went from Abram to Abraham, Sarai to Sarah. Is it the recognition when God names you that names you with a sense of the faith that is starting to grow inside of you? And moreover, for the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. Now, I'm not saying that I don't know at this moment, when I read and study this story, if Zacchaeus is already lost. My argument, or something I'd like you to consider, I'm saying he was lost.
Yeah.
And thank you. He was. And of course, loss is a tough word, isn't it? I'm going to say not content. I'm going to say just going about in life without a more focus on what's the larger picture of why are you here. What I'm saying at this point, he's not lost. It's like Bartimaeus, who can't see. They already know. They already sense. So that's a really, really important point. And I want to quickly bring in, this has happened before. This naming is really, really important in Old Testament liturgy, but I want you to notice, I think maybe the honor of Jesus, calling him a son of Abraham. It's happened before. One of my favorite stories is the story of the bent over woman. And she's been bent over her whole life. And Jesus calls her. And I'm just going to read it to you real quickly. It's a little bit before this. It's in chapter 13. But I want you to listen to how this story is, again, a transformation story, because Jesus names the person. Now, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, said to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which we work. Come on those days and be cured, not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" So again, this naming at the end of this story is also a part of, I think, the grace, the dance of God in this narrative on Zacchaeus, that Jesus invited himself in, looked up at the tree, invited himself in, and turned to this crowd and said, "But this is a child of Abraham." And the naming part is very, very, very important. I think I'm reminded in Paul, in his second letter to the Corinthians, he talks about Abraham. And let me read just a little bit for you. I'm reading 2 Corinthians chapter 7, starting at verse 10. To suffer in God's way means changing for the better and leaving no regrets, but to suffer as the world knows suffering brings death. Just look at what suffering in God's way has brought you. What keenness, what explanations, what alarm. Yes, and what aching to see me, what concern for me, and what justice should be done. In every way, you have shown yourselves blameless in this affair. So then I write a letter to you, and it was not written for the sake of either the offender or the offended. It was to make you realize in the sight of God, your own concern is for us, and that is what we have found so encouraging. So I think if we look at this picture and this scene, is this really about conversion? And is conversion for a moment, like Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus? Or is it a story of a journey of faith, a journey of conversion? And are people that are seeking, okay, in our own lives today or then, but I'm going to bring it forward to today, are they any less sons or daughters of Abraham? Are the seekers any less than someone who was baptized or confirmed when they were 8 years old and have never left the church? You know, they worship, they're very good stewards of the church. I'm not saying that's a lesser or greater person. I'm simply saying, is the seeker less or more or equal to all of us who are people, who are sons and daughters of Abraham, who are people of faith? And remember, a little while ago, I said that I felt Zacchaeus was curious. And maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe he's confident at this point. He's confident enough to go through that crowd, climb up the tree, and look. Probably he wants to hear what this man, Jesus, has to say. So my question to all of us is that this story, to me, gives us a sort of a bird's eye view of how I envision God is looking down on all of us, that we're all his creation, we're all his children at all points of our life, because my feeling is this is a perfect example of a journey of faith. We're, Zacchaeus had to journey to get here, right? He had to journey to have that confidence to push through that crowd of people who did not like him. They could have stoned him, hit him, I don't know. But he had the confidence or something in his heart. I'm not going to hit my heart because then I'll hit this. He had the confidence he had the confidence in his heart that grace was already there birthing to say, oh, sure, come on, you can come to my house. Oh, and by the way, let me tell you what I've already done. I've paid back the people that I robbed money from. Just in case you want to know.
Well, I'm ready to do it. He's ready. He's ready when he climbs the tree.
Yeah. Especially, now that we've described as best we can the crowd that he's with. Good luck climbing the tree, right? Men don't wear pants. They wear long dresses like an Afghan. They could have ripped that to shreds, but he doesn't. He's ready. He's very ready. And I wonder, there's the question also, is that after this happens, remember, because Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, and it's quite a trek, and then we know what happens next. Does he become a disciple of Jesus? Does he follow him? What does he do next? We don't know. We never hear about him again. But he's ready. Yeah, he's ready. Okay, so does everybody see that? Okay, so I just want to read some thoughts of Paul Tillich, who is German and American, and he is a theologian and a philosopher who died recently, well, not recently, but in our lifetime, 1965. Paul Tillich maintains that the main dividing line runs not between those who regard themselves as believers and those who regard themselves as non-believers, but between those whom God leaves indifferent and those who are existentially concerned by the question of God. Whether they are passionate seekers after God, like mystics, people wrestling with God like Nietzsche, or people who thirst after faith but are unable to find a place in any form of religion that they have so far encountered. So my question to us this morning, how can we respect otherness? Or should we? Should we all be measured? Should we all measure our faith and make sure it's equal enough? And Joe says, fine, you can come to resurrection. Or do we take the seekers among us? And I'm a seeker. I'm thirsty. And do we accept that this is a conversion in process? I mean, I'm so young, as you well know, but my faith has been a journey, and I venture to say some of you have had a journey. And so is conversion a moment? And if it's not, if it's a journey, where is resurrection in this? Where is your welcoming of the seeker, or should I rather say comforting the questioner, comforting the person that grabs you on the street tomorrow and says, hey, about your God, how did you, as Joe implied in her sermon this morning, which was really got me thinking, really, God, this pandemic? I mean, yeah. So are there seekers, and are we welcoming them? Or does my faith have to be equal to Joe's faith? We happen to both be priests, but let's say we weren't. Does Joe test me? Do I test Joe in order to feel a part of, like, do I sort of make the mark, so to speak? So in discussing conversion or faith, I like the questions. I like the question. I like the idea that the tax collector had the guts and the self-confidence to do what he did. And we never heard about the table fellowship. I don't know how that conversation went. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to try screen sharing again. I have something else to share with you. In my research, I'll just show you the book. I came across, I'm not going to sing, but I know you all know the story of Zacchaeus, and I'm not going to sing that. It's from your childhood. Okay, fine. But there's very little that I could find of theologians that have used the story of Zacchaeus and the person of Zacchaeus as a foundation for a book or their own faith. But then I came across through a friend, a gentleman named Tomas Halleck, excuse me, I'm not Czech, so forgive me if I didn't pronounce that correctly, who is a Roman Catholic priest who lived during the fall of communism in Czechoslovakia and currently lives in the Czech Republic, even though he travels around the world lecturing. And he wrote this wonderful, wonderful book called Patience with God, the story of Zacchaeus continuing in us. And what I loved about this book, I mean, it's so, so rich and so good, is he talks in many instances, he gives vignettes, he has other theologians' commentary in him. But what he talks about is finding patience with ourselves and patience with God, about this notion of faith, conversion, and who is the son and daughter of Abraham. So just listen as I read this small clip. I think it's really something to meditate on. Is it not God who conceals great things in small things and shows his strength in the weak, also present somehow in the faith of those in whom it consists solely of seeking? of an unsated hunger for truth, meaning, and of unremitting questions? Is it not in the faith of the Zacchaeuses, who are still concealed in their hiding places and peeping out very obtrusively, and in faith that simply takes the form of unarticulated longing, and in faith in which there is more trembling than firmness, more questions than answers, more doubts than certainties? I said at the start that I didn't think that Zacchaeus was happy. I don't like that word, but I think Zacchaeus could point as a story of not being, and in that discontent, he starts to verbalize seeking and his action during the seeking, not asked by God or not asked by Jesus. Okay, are you going to repay people you cheated? No, 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 no. It's part of that journey of seeking. That transformation or that conversion, can we think of it after today's lessons and the story of Zacchaeus? It is a journey. It is a journey. And how do we protect, and I mean you and me and people of resurrection and beyond this community, how do we protect the daughters and sons of Abraham who question, who are seeking, who maybe want a conversion? I don't know if I like that word necessarily. I say more of an invitation to enter into the grace of God. And I'll confess that originally when Joe assigned me this for my homework, I thought, really? I need, I want somebody else. And I wanted the Samaritan woman. I mean, I love that story, love it. And I almost sent her a note and said, I think when we talked about this, I said I was going to do the Samaritan woman, but I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And I love it. So my thank you goes to Joe. Wow, what a rich, rich story. So before we're done, let's do some questions and let's do some comments. Okay, comments, questions. Or confessions, maybe. Which I already confessed I was still seeking, but I mean that sincerely.
I thank you because it's so rich when you do these.
Yeah, I'm sort of afraid when we get in the sanctuary. Yeah, I'm going to have my hands tied this way.
It's a difficult topic.
It is.
And it's a difficult thing to think that, God, our encounters with Christ change us in some way.
Yeah.
Even though it's a journey, we're always encountering Christ in new ways, and he's always nudging us along,
Yeah. And is it also, Joe, that we encounter people that we see Christ in, or we don't know what it is, but there's something about them that is so inviting. Even in the midst of a difficult time, be an illness or something tragic, sometimes you sense this. That's God, I think.
Yeah.
Susan, I think that all of us probably hope and dream that with the new church eventually opening up and it being in such a beautiful prime location, that there will be many Zacchaeuses that will come into the door and we will welcome them like Jesus welcomed Zacchaeus. He obviously was, quote unquote, ripe for picking. He felt he was ready, and that's when he told Jesus, I'm going to give half what I own. I'm going to restore 4 times. He thought this through. And even many of us, I think, are like that in our own lives. We who are on this Zoom and in the church already, we are ready to do that. So it's a beautiful story, and I hope the dream comes true that we have, that we can really not prejudge people, but let this be a haven, that beautiful new church, be a heaven on earth for so many people just walking off the street even.
Yeah.
Thank and praise you, God.
Thank you. I like that, heaven on earth. Yeah. And that's lovely. Thank you very much.
I can relate to always feeling like you're on a journey, because it seems to me spiritually I've been down a lot of paths before I ended up in this resurrection path. You know?
Yeah. Thanks be to God, really. Thank you for sharing that with me, because I don't know your story, and I know I will as time goes on. So thank you.
I feel like I'm always kind of wandering in and out of focus.
Well, good for you. I'm not either. So I remember last week you were saying how you didn't really care for Paul and you found him confusing. And I that sat with me, and I thought, yeah, thanks, because I agree. So thank you. Yeah. But I think it's, isn't it, Joe, just somehow the way your church welcomes, I realize it's in a Zoom class, but I believe it to be true if we were in a room together, that you don't seem to judge people for the questions, even if it's needing a didactic answer, like, oh, I don't get this. But that's a goodness, that's grace that's sort of floating in and around your church.
Well, let me name something about the church you're very much a part of and in the middle of at the moment. Okay, so here's my testimony. You know, when the woman came for a long while who was incontinent every week in the pew, you all cleaned it up after she left.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you didn't refuse her entry or make her change. You know, and that's a testimony. That speaks volumes louder than words. And when the homeless man who was living at Planet Fitness came and was a vital part of our community, you know, you all welcomed him in. And, you know, our junior warden was homeless when I got there. He wasn't the junior warden at the time, but, you know, it's a church that's very welcoming because in a way we know what it's like to be judged.
Yeah.
You know, people look at us and think, you know, improbable, you know, okay. But, and then they look around and see, you know, people being fed and people being clothed and, you know, love being shared. And, you know, it doesn't mean we're perfect, but it means we live or try to what we say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is this why Jesus, one of the reasons, is this why he recognized Zacchaeus? Because people judged Jesus the minute he left Nazareth. And he went home and they threw rocks at him and they threw him out of town. So Jesus knew what it was like to be judged without really listening. So am I guilty before I even have a chance? So
yeah. But Jesus loves perfect people too. But he hangs around with the rest of us kind of on the margin.
It seems very much like Jesus is making this statement, like he's almost recognizing, I'm here to serve the lost.
Yeah.
That's one of my jobs.
Yeah.
That's a job description.
Yeah. The rejected. Yeah.
Well, who did Jesus ever know that was perfect?
Yeah. Boy, that's, well, I mean,
Peter.
I thought Martha and Mary were pretty perfect in my eyes, but yeah, no, that would be an excellent series. Who in the synoptics and John were perfect. What's perfect? But
Well, there was a perfect guy. Think about that. The man who was rich kept all the laws, but he didn't give away his money like Zacchaeus did. So
there you go.
Be a great series.
There you go.
What a great day. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for your homily and blessings on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good week. We'll see you on Wednesday night in our Lenten journey.